So thanks for talking with me today, Wade. It's been awesome. Part of my journey for the biooptimizers, and I'll come into why it's so important, particularly. Obviously, Wade, you're a bit of a name in the biohacking space. I don't know if the biohacking thing was on purpose, but seemed to have been picked up by biohackers everywhere, including Dave, and I know Martin Tobias over at Upgrade Labs as well is a big fan, and quite a few of the tribe over here in London, whether or not you guys know that or not yet. So obviously you've got a big history in this space, and I think the thing that brought my awareness to you most was that you're a plant-based bodybuilder, and I can't remember the exact stats, but it's something like budybuilders don't utilize like 40% of their protein, and by taking the proteolytic enzymes actually breaks down the protein so much better into the building blocks, i.e. the amino acids, that you can eat less protein and get more gains. And I think as a plant-based bodybuilder, that's just freaking awesome, because most people say it's not possible. So that's one thing that really caught my attention, and I hope I'm correct in saying it like that. And obviously you've got a range of different supplements as well at the moment, which we'll run through in a minute. So just from the man himself, like, tell me, what is biooptimizers and what's it stand for?
Great question. So biooptimizers was originally founded by myself and my business partner, Matt Gallant. And for those who don't know who Matt is, like, him and I were personal trainers and exercise physiologists and nutritionists and performance guys that were working in 20 years ago, helping people hit a higher level of performance, function, aesthetics, all those type of things. And we ended up forming a company. We both had a passion for building muscle and bodybuilding. So which is really in a lot of, I think if people look at the historical aspects of where biohacking emerged, I would say its foundation is actually in the bodybuilding community, who were people who were committed to achieving extraordinary levels of performance relative to muscular size and aesthetics, which is, you're fighting a lot of biological mechanisms in order to do that, to achieve that result. And so our foundation was kind of organic to that. We didn't think of ourselves as biohackers, but we were talking about electrostimulation machines and mental technology and the leveraging of digestive health technology to enhance recovery and performance 20 years ago. And that eventually emerged into the company now known today as biooptimizers. It's been a continuous journey from 2004 when what happened is I had competed at the Mr. Universe contest and went through my own physiological crisis because I had destroyed my digestive health system by following the advocates of performance, which virtually every high performance ends up there one way or another when you push those envelopes without the safety mechanisms for health. Mm-hmm. And so we got that messaging out and started the company then, and then it emerged 5 or 6 years ago. We became biooptimizers, which is when we developed the mechanism, systems, and experience from the thousands of people that we had coached around the world. Is like, okay, we're going for what we call biologically optimized humans. And what a biologically optimized human is someone who is in pursuit of what we call 3 distinct aspects that generally people are going through: aesthetics, performance, and health. And so most people start their journey to look better, to make oneself more attractive to the opposite sex, or have more self-confidence, or look better in the clothes, whatever that happens to be. And as you go down that, you realize there's performance enhancement components that come to it. Now, there's some people that go straight to the performance side of athletics and are unconcerned about aesthetics. That's, like say with a power lifter or something like that, or some other sport that doesn't really require on aesthetics. But for the general population, I think aesthetics and performance are kind of balanced. But ultimately, what I see a lot of people is there's a tendency in our short-term thinking to create what I call health compromising technological innovations. And this would be the use of radicalized diets. It could be the use of harmful or harmful chemicals to produce a performance or an aesthetic-based result, which actually compromises health. And so those three aspects of that triangle are the foundational conceptual ideas. And the idea of a biological optimized humans is to be able to have enough resources, physiological resources, the workers and materials that allows people to experience the optimal flow of quantities and qualities of the chemical components and technological innovations to allow us to access the optimal levels of our own genetic capabilities. And it maybe at some point even be going beyond those, because I do believe that is where we're headed, is to actually be able to manipulate our biology in a way that will transcend what we thought was possible for humans. So I do believe that we are in an evolution of Homo sapien into Homo something else. Maybe Homo optimized. I don't know.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting way that you put that, because I did a podcast with Chris Gevin about 18 months ago.
Yeah, I love Chris. He's a great guy.
I love Chris. He's like one of my favorite people. I call him one of the wolf pack. He really is. He's a legend. Yeah. And we were just discussing, obviously, for his angle is obviously the body composition, or should I say, I call it body comp side of things. And he said that a lot of his listeners are more about the aesthetics and how they look. And I was like, so his evolution into health optimization or biohacking, some of his followers it doesn't resonate with. And I said, but the interesting thing is if these people realize that health from the inside makes them look better on the outside and helps them to look better on the outside and with their gains, then in fact that they would buy into the whole health piece. The thing is, it's not because they're ill. Then the most motivated people are obviously that's sick. And I was like, and the way to engage his followers, we discussed this live actually, it's quite funny, is obviously show them how they can be healthier from the inside out. And we actually discussed proteolytic enzymes as well at the time, and I remember talking to him about you because it's just amazing. So it's really interesting how you come from the aesthetic side of things and considering that on the health side of things from the inside out. So it's really does go hand in hand. And I think for a lot of people in the body composition world, they don't necessarily think that. I think when I read the book Death in the Locker Room, I'm not sure you know, about 3 years ago, it's really interesting. And I remember thinking, like bodybuilders really are the original biohackers, but not necessarily for health, different, manipulating their biology.
And I think that's also true for many people on the more extreme side of biohacking. And if there's one caveat or one issue that I have with the quote unquote biohacking community is and one of the reasons why we called our company biooptimizers is because, to me, a hack indicates some sort of shortcut and often has unintended consequences. And bodybuilders, per se, the high performance type of bodybuilders and people within that community who essentially is aesthetics over everything else. It's not even really a performance-based community. It's hardcore driven aesthetics, as I would say is the female kind of cosmetic and fashion industry, which are primarily based in the animal drives of attractiveness, or what we see as attractiveness, although most people don't feel bodybuilders are that necessarily attractive. But within that community, that is the definition of attractiveness. Oftentimes they tried to hack their biology using extreme levels of technology or chemicalization, which were able to produce those results, no less than putting harmful chemicals on the skin of a woman in order to achieve a certain cosmetic ideal. So these are the pursuit of cosmetic ideal within those communities, and concordant with their distortions that we're seeing proliferate in society. Well, guess what? There is an issue with that, because oftentimes you end up losing performance and you lose an aesthetic. I don't think anybody would consider a bodybuilder per se, a professional bodybuilder, as a high performing citizen of the world. Neither would we have the starving model who's achieved what the world would call cosmetic appeal, but has compromised her health in pursuit of that. So those are the hacks that can get us in trouble. And it's like, how do we look our best, perform our best while maintaining the optimal levels of health. So we're looking towards that with biOptimizers.
It's really interesting because the irony there for me is that, and there's 2 points here, is one is people put makeup on or do whatever to the outside of their body so that they look prettier. But in fact, if they just focused on their health, they would look prettier in the first place. And all they're doing is they're putting a patch on, a plaster on, opposed to actually fixing from the inside out, which just gives them longevity. So it's just really interesting. The other thing about the biohacking side of things is that when I got into biohacking, this must have been like 6 years ago now, I'd been a biohacker without knowing it for 4 or 5 years before I knew Dave Asprey's work, before I knew what Bulletproof coffee was. And I was tracking all these crazy things, and unbeknown to me, there was a whole tribe out there. But one thing for me, I got into it because I had been ill and had chronic health issues that no one could really help me with. And so when I obviously got into the biohacking space, I called it Health Optimization Summit, because the goal is health optimization. And it's not just all the funky, cool biohacks that people do, crazy things, the chip implants and all this lot. It's more about the health angle of biohacking. And it's worked really well, actually, because we obviously year one last year, we had 1,200 people, and we had the lineup that was in a year 5 or year 6. And in fact, the Bulletproof guys said it was more like a year 4 or 5 in year 1. And I think that was mainly just down to the caliber of the speakers, the positioning of it, and because it resonated with people like, for instance, my mum that didn't know what biohacking was, but sure knows what health optimization is because it's important to her. So it's like, that's our angle over here. And I think that's what's really helped us, because we're working on several other countries as well as London, and we're only in year 2 for London. So yeah, it's really nice. I feel like there's a good fit here. And from your products and from what I've heard of you speak, it feels like it's a good fit, product wise and ethos. So that's really cool.
Well, thank you for that. And I would to just comment on it. I arrived by this conclusion organically from the standpoint is after I competed at the Mr. Universe contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks and went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow, and met a medical doctor at the time who I asked him, well, how does this happen after 16 years of training in the no Spartan discipline, going to this kind of cosmetic idea? How did I end up in this situation? And he says, Wade, you've learned to build a body from the outside in, not the inside out. And that hit me. It's hard to overcome one's ignorance in the pursuit of excellence, but invariably the obstacles and challenges that we experience in that pursuit can lead us to these discoveries. And I feel it's my duty and my mission, as does Matt, to communicate this message on a massive scale, and also into the communities who are driving to this, so that they can avoid some of the errors that we did as pioneers of the industry, so that they can even hit greater levels of health, vitality, performance, and aesthetics than currently.
Oh man, it's awesome. It's really awesome. So, I mean, well, I guess just to move on to the next step is for the listeners. I just want to, it's important that people, all the attendees, understand why you're here. And I think from what we discussed already, it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's like our vision or values kind of overlap really well about optimizing from the inside out and optimizing health, not just about doing funky things. But again, I chose you guys and really wanted you guys to come along. And, every single brand that comes along has been carefully selected, and we invite exhibitors. We don't just hope people to get in contact and we take their money. It really is selecting really carefully. There's no gap fillers. There's no rubbish brands where you roll your eyes at another crappy product that's just full of chemicals. We don't have any of that. And so the reason why obviously I invited you was because when I heard about proteolytic enzymes, and I tried another brand that wasn't quite so good, and there's several out there, and it worked okay. And someone told me that, oh yeah, you should try these enzymes that, I've heard that if you have a cyst, then it breaks down. Someone said to me there was a cyst on their leg, and they took high dose of proteolytic enzymes, and it helped the cyst go, and it helped with this and that and the other. So I was like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this out and see how it went. And the first day, actually, it was the Masszymes by you guys, and I was awaiting them like a pot of, like the suitcase in Pulp. It's like when I opened up the box from the delivery, it was just like, I can't wait to try these things. And yeah, like I think it was about 5 to 10 of them first time round, because I'd heard about you mega dosing them and trying them like crazy just to make sure you didn't digest yourself from the inside out. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to go for it. And the mental clarity, I remember sitting down at my desk and I took them on an empty stomach, so that would be systemic opposed to just digesting the food. And my brain came alive. I was just like, this is something special. So I started researching proteolytic enzymes and all the different things. And I think one thing that you said somewhere was that enzymes are in charge of pretty much everything. And it's an enzyme that makes you be able to wink your eyelid. And it's like, well, when you think about it like that, having the right enzymes is super important. And if our food is deficient, or there's not enough enzymes in them, or our body's not working as it should, then it's super important to get it right. And so I invited you specifically because of that. And it's been such a big part for me. And quite a few of the tribe over here in England, when they've added it in, that they found that their energy's better, that they're digesting their food better. And often people have tried it mega dosing on an empty stomach as well. And I got up to 30 tablets a day, 3 times a day. And I did that pretty much for a whole month. And it was awesome. After that, I kind of like backed off a little bit, because, but I did.
It's cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. But the point is, they're awesome, and I've tested them to the max. And as with every brand, I can personally attest to like saying that they're really good. So really interested to know like what your thoughts are on the summit, or what you've heard from the history from last year, or from your team, or anything like that. Great
question. I'm actually really excited. We have a pretty large following in the UK and expanding throughout Europe. And last year was my first foray over into Scandinavia to attend some biohacking summits. And I was aware of I wanted to come last year. However, the scheduling didn't allow for it. And there were some scheduling conflicts, which I actually suspended going to an event here in North America so I could attend your summit, because of the quality of the presenters and the quality of the companies that are represented in there. And I do believe that for people who are taking the time, effort, and energy to really embrace this movement, if you'll call it, the fact that you're curating the event so well, and the people that you're bringing into it, and the quality of the information that is being distributed to the attendees, makes it exciting and an honor to be able to come to the event. I've heard great things from the speakers that have attended, and the other companies that have attended, and said, and because we all kind of talk about different events or different people or different things, that just through casual conversation and our connections, and they're like, yeah, this is a really cool event, this is something that you want to go to, this is something that you'll find a lot of value in. And also for me, these events are some of the ways that I actually get to learn as well, because I'm a student as much as I am a teacher, and I certainly don't have a license on all this information, and I'm continuously learning each and every week. That's why I run a podcast, because that's the best way I can learn, is to actually interview people and find out more and have a conversation, so I can ask pertinent questions and then integrate their discoveries, which are oftentimes decades to figure out. This one little nuance thing, I can get decades of experience synthesized in 45 minutes to an hour. And so that's what I'll be doing at the event, is synthesizing what we've learned in the last 20 plus years of collective experience and coaching, so that someone can, if they want to embrace that in their lives, they have that opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny. Dr. McCullough mentioned about a month ago now on a podcast he did with Dr. Dominic Nichwitz, who's the biological dentist that's speaking. He said that this is one of the 2 best health events of the year, which is big from Dr. McCullough, because I've followed his work for 10 years, and I've read every newsletter pretty much every day. It's pretty good. And so yeah, it's really flattering. Well, considering the other event isn't happening this year, hopefully this makes us the best health event of the year, which is awesome. So yeah, okay, cool. So what we're going to move on to is how to optimize your digestion, supercharge your protein, and muscle building and fat burning, basically. And I think this ties in really well with the product. Actually, I just started testing last week that your guys sent me, which was the new black bottle, which was the fat-based.
The Capex must be the
one.
Yeah.
I feel they're pretty potent. So I'd love to touch on that in a minute. Definitely. But yeah, so how to optimize your digestion and supercharge your protein, muscle building, fat burning as well. This is the topic for the day. So yeah, so where should we start?
Well, I think for your listeners, I think first is to understand the certain physiological mechanics of why optimizing your digestion is important in today's world. And I've tried to be as brief as possible and explain this in layman's terms so people can understand the concepts. And when you understand the concepts or the context, then the content starts to make sense. So Kit, let's look at the human digestive system. It's a single canal from your mouth to your anus. The bottom line is when you consume food, there is it's a very sophisticated, multi-stage process that allows people to digest, assimilate, and utilize the food that they consume and eliminate whatever's left over. This is the digestive and elimination process. And if there is any interruption within that process, we do not have the ability to leverage the food that we eat into the energy units or the building blocks. And oftentimes that food now becomes actually a toxin or a disruptor of what we're trying to achieve physiologically, whether that's aesthetics or performance or health or whatever. Our food actually becomes a poison. And so why is that? Well, let me explain. There's 5 different stages of digestion inside the body. And that starts with we taste, touch, smell, and feel the food and put it in our mouth and start to masticate it. At that point, our body will resonate. And to just give you an example, if I start talking about dill pickles and sauerkraut, we instantly have a salivary response inside our body that says that we are already preconditioned to start preparing ourselves for a response to our digestive system. Second thing is, as we chew the food up, the food will then travel down the esophagus. And as it gets to the top part of our stomach, called the upper cardiac portion of the stomach, this is where the enzymes present in the food are supposed to begin the process of digestion, the next stage of digestion. Unfortunately, thanks to modern food production, distribution, and cooking, we've virtually eliminated all the naturally occurring enzymes in our diet. They're the only people in the world, the only species on the planet that cooks its food and eliminates the natural enzymatic component. And I got a whole tirade I could go on about the definition of food and why enzymes and bacteria need to be infused into that as opposed to just protein, fats, and carbohydrates. So the definition of food has left us with a decision-making tree that is incomplete, and that's led to a lot of problems. After the first 30 to 60 minutes of digestion in that upper cardiac portion of the stomach, the food drops down and hydrochloric acid has been building up in this moment. And hydrochloric acid serves 2 distinct purposes. Its first and primarily function is to disinfect our food, to destroy pathogens coming in with the food, bacteria, viruses, pathogenic parasites, and these type of microorganisms that could be causing damage in the body. And this is a very important part of our immune system function. Second of all, the changing of the pH from whatever pH that we were, let's say we were eating an alkaline or slightly acidic food group, that would start to change as we get in this high level of stomach acid over the duration of time that digestion is taking part. So what happens is certain enzymes are activated and other enzymes are reactivated or deactivated during the change of that pH. And then once that's complete and peristaltic contraction continues on and the mixing of that food chyme, the body will release what's called bicarbonate buffers as the food exits the stomach and into the intestinal tract. If you don't have those minerals, that's all bicarbonate buffers are, fancy name for alkaline minerals, that buffer those strong acids. If you don't have that, then you get into disruption in the intestinal tract. Mm-hmm. So in stage number 1, if you don't have enough enzymes present, this is where people start incompletely digesting proteins, and certain amino acids are cleaved in that point that set up the breakdown of other amino acids, and then a lot of people are missing that. If you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, you'll start to experience things like heartburn and acid reflux, which is ironically because the esophagus sphincter, at the top of the stomach, stays open, and some of this food chyme will go up, and that acid will burn your esophagus. Now, what the medical community is prescribes you antacids, which are actually further exacerbating the problem that you're dealing with low stomach acid. So, third thing, if you don't have enough sufficient minerals, now you start getting gastritis and inflammation and ulcers inside the intestinal tract from the acids that are coming out of the stomach. And then finally, in the intestinal tract, we have the microbiome, which is a fancy name for the gut flora or the microbes of bacteria, which I would say are good, 10% good, 10% bad, and 80% opportunists. Basically, this microbiome is dynamically changing with the dietary practices that you have, your environmental conditions that you are subjected to, high stress, low stress, blue light, non-blue light, natural lighting, fluorescent halogenic lighting, chemicalization, electromagnetic pollution. All of these things are contributing to that dynamic diversity of anywhere from 200 to 500 different strains of probiotics, which are literally the final stage of converting the food you eat into the energy units you use or the building blocks. And without these essential microorganisms, you would die. So there's anywhere from 5 to 10 times the amount of these microorganisms than you have cells in your body. So this brings up the fascinating question of like, okay, well, what happens if I don't have sufficient, an optimal function of these organisms, or I'm missing organisms due to antibacterial sterilization practices or through the use of prolific use of antibiotics, which we are seeing on a society at large. Well, guess what? All of a sudden now you can't convert your food into the energy units that you require, or you can't build the neurotransmitters that allows you to think clearly or function properly. Oh, and you can't break down those proteins that you've consumed. And now those are feeding bad bacteria, which are now crapping in your blood, producing all sorts of neurotoxins and inflammatory based toxins inside the body. And so literally your food has now become a poison. And then the final stage is elimination, which is a result of parasitic contraction, which is a combination of your relation to nervous system function to the gut flora. And we sit a lot nowadays. We are indoors a lot of days, and we have lost the natural occurring musculature that you would have as humans that existed previously without a highly modernized society. And that loss of muscle contraction, peristaltic smooth muscle contraction, due to the compromisation of our spine, our nervous system, and overall lack of muscle mass, will now makes it very difficult to eliminate properly as we normally would as the human has evolved over billions of years. So the three primary areas where people run into problems is insufficient enzymes in their diet, insufficient levels of hydrochloric acid, either due to aging or due to some biochemical dehydration is a big common element, or a dysbiosis of the good, the bad, and the ugly bacteria within our intestinal tract. Finally, and the inability, the lack of muscular contraction, which is known as the peristaltic contraction process of the body due to some compromised physiology. Those are the areas that people don't break down their food and convert it to the energy units and building blocks they require.
That's really, really nice, really nice way of putting it. I think I once heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that only 15% of the digestive process is the bacteria at the end of it, and it's or roughly, and it's the processes before that that are really super important. So when people say, oh, I've been on antibiotics, now I'm not digesting my food, well, actually that's about the stress, and it, you know, obviously it's about further up than the last part of it mainly, and so that's one piece. So people that are optimizing their bacteria all the time. Well, the other thing is that if we talk about evolutional times, it's like they used to go and kill an animal or pick the food, put it in the side of the cave, which would ferment for a few days, which would have good bacteria in it to a point. You know, we'd cook it to kill off some bad bacteria on the fire. They would eat it within, you know, the circadian rhythm type of thing within certain days, because you can't eat when it's too late. The man would then go out and do high intensity exercise, but running after an animal to kill it, to bring it back to the cave. The wife would nurture at home and not need to fast quite so long, because she'd have a little store of food there. So not only are they getting probiotics and good bacteria, opposed to us having sterile food in the fridge, it's got all the live enzymes in it all the time. And so it's helping the digestive process. So it's really interesting how to hear it, like, you know, in your side, because I feel like it's I've got snapshots from a slightly different angle on it. But the other thing is that obviously the enzymes that are so important in all the processes that, again, I think this probably came from you from somewhere or other. Maybe I'm just regurgitating it, but it's about breaking down the proteins into the peptides. I think it goes proteins, peptides, polypeptides, and then amino acids, which are the building blocks we need. So when I did NutriAvout intercellular test with Dr. Ted Achacoso a while ago, and Scott Scher, who's a dear friend of mine, and it showed that I was really deficient on some amino acids. And it's like really interesting because really the only main thing I changed in the whole digestive process was a little bit of HCl, but not always, but definitely biooptimizers, proteolytic, or the enzymes, literally ever since. And the next test I did a year later, it was perfect. And Scott just replied thumbs up to the email as in like, well done. So I can, again, personally attest why these enzymes are so important with the food and the hydrochloric acid as well, because you're just going to be fatigued because you're not getting the nutrients from your food. Regardless of whether you've got the gut bacteria, you need to optimize that as well. But really, if you're not optimizing up here, I think the other thing that Dr. Chris Shade once told me was about the liver bitters to speed up your liver. Which again, I sometimes use bitters, but I prefer the enzymes personally. I just feel like they're more manageable and resonate better with me, and there's no sugar in it and things like that, which, you know, obviously I'm low carb. So it really does fit together really, really well. And I think people that are trying to optimize their digestion are just taking hydrochloric acid or taking liver bitters or taking probiotics every day, but just feeding their SIBO. They should be optimizing using these enzymes, empty stomach and with food. So it's awesome to hear you say that, because it really fits so well in with the model that I've learned and tested personally, and with, you know, quite a few other people. So obviously that's optimizing your digestion and supercharging your protein, which really obviously makes sense, I guess. So in terms of muscle building and fat burning, how do you think that, you know, they fit in with that specifically?
Well, great question. And so we have many advocates, like one of the current favorites for the Miss Olympia, who's using our products as an enhancement for her digestion and her dietary requirements in order for recovery. And so it's been shown in research that the use of proteolytic enzymes speeds the recovery process, whether it's the healing of contusions or musculature that has been damaged through the performance of exercise activity, and the increased and I believe it's because of the increased assimilation of amino acids, and also the conversion of those digestive enzymes into systemic enzymes, which are related to chemical processes involved in the recovery. And so we have reason to believe, through our research and our experience, that the use of proteolytic enzymes has cascading effects, particularly when they're taken on an empty stomach. They evolve into systemic enzymes, and I've witnessed firsthand the rapid healing of scar tissue, the correction of neurotransmitter imbalances in people's brains that had led to anxiety, a variety of shifting in skin conditions, the enhancement of fat metabolism inside the body, depending on the enzymes that people take. So there's three main categories of enzymes: proteolytic enzymes, which are proteases. There are carbohydrate digesting enzymes, which are amylases. And then there are lipases, which are enzymes which are involved in fat metabolism. Now, with Masszymes, there's 17 different enzymes. So there's families within all of those different types of proteases, different types of lipases, amylase. We developed the Capex, for example, which is particularly for people on a ketogenic diet, which has 4 different types of lipases, because the stimulation of fats are very high. And so with different products, we've now curated relative to the dietary choices, because those are going to be enzymatically relative to those dietary practices.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've been testing them for the last week, and I find that when I go too high fat, it's not good for my digestion. But with these bad boys, I chuck in 3. It says 2 on there, but I chuck in 3. I find them to be really good, especially with my bulletproof coffee in the morning. I mean, I like them systemically, and again, for healing, I had an operation and mega dosed for quite a while after, actually, and the scars are pretty much gone. It's amazing how scars that have been around for a while start vanishing as well. They really do break down things. And it's funny because I had an operation back in January to have a metal implant taken out. It's a long coil, long story, but basically the surgeon, because it was still stuck in the vein that they had cut out. So he left it with me in the tube. And so I broke off 5 mastimes and put it in the tube. And it took a week. It took a whole week to digest the whole vein, but then out comes the perfect metal untouched. So it shows that for me, the assurance was that it's not going to digest me from the inside out, i.e. even mega dosing on an empty stomach. They're safe. I can personally, again, talk about that, and I know you have as well. I heard you speak to Dave about it a long time ago.
I went to 1,000. I went to 1,000 in a day to test it, wow. and never broke the GI barrier, which was also interesting because usually if you mega dose a vitamin or something like that, you get the runs. So yeah, it's safe. It's safe to do that. It's
good fasting. I find it's very good fasting as well to clear out the inside of the digestive system, break things down. And when I saw what it did to the vein over the space of a week, maybe 6 days, you could see that it was just gently breaking it down bit by bit. And that was only like 4 or 5 of them in a whole week. So some going in and just passing through you and doing its business while you're fasting. I think it's like pretty awesome. So yeah, so I actually took a photo of it, Instagrammed it, and showed the
God, I want to see that. I want to see that result. That's a pretty powerful result. If you could send that over, I'd love that.
Yeah,
because that's a great experiment. That's a radically cool experiment.
It was I set everything up for the hospital. I had grounding strip from Clint Ober with me. I had the EMF reader to make sure that the hotel room was good. Had everything, proteolytic enzymes, because I read online that after this operation they don't let you have it because it's still got the vein around it. So yeah, so it's pretty set up well. Awesome. So just out of interest, what are the sources of these enzymes? I mean, obviously I know, but for the listener, I think, like, what are these enzymes that seem to be so magical? I mean, like, yeah, so one thing that Keith from PaleoF always does is whenever he has a meal, he blesses it. And many people do this, as spiritual people that are actually biohackers do. And I've realized that it's about preparing the body to produce your own enzymes to digest things. So if we prepare those ourselves, where do they come from when you put them in a supplement?
Well, it depends, but for the most part, most of them are grown on various mediums using fungal cultures or these type of things. And the process of producing enzymes is a highly secretive process, particularly because when you're dealing with products such as what we produce, there's different types of enzymes. There are plant-based enzymes, there are animal-based enzymes, there are, and then there are what's called systemic enzymes, and then there's cultured enzymes. And so an enzyme that you would find in, say, plants, like you'll see papain, for example, which could be extracted from a fruit or vegetable or something like that. That would be an enzyme that you'd get from a food enzyme. Or you would get some of animal-based enzymes. So, for example, ox bile and pig bile is often used in some formulations, and of course vegetarians will have some problems with that, or the pH range is somewhat limited compared to plant-based enzymes. A systemic enzyme is a cultured enzyme from a medium, usually some sort of fungal medium. And for people worried about that are on antifungal diets, they can rest assured that they're not going to have any issues with something cultured, because the enzymes are actually extracted from the medium so that there's no residual components. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sell them. So that's a common concern that you can alleviate from. And then the third stage is a cultured enzyme. And a cultured enzyme is you take fungal bacteria or fungal cultures, or sometimes bacteria cultures, depending on, and these are grown on specific mediums under very conditioned circumstances. And oftentimes those conditions are enhanced in order to make enzymes that are 100 to 1,000 times more potent than something that you would find in nature. So they're literally biohacked enzymes. And when you take those, you get a much more prolific effect. And also you're taking in extremely large quantities relative to what we would do if we were eating some sort of food medium, whatever our dietary choices were, if we were eating those in a raw, enzymatically preserved state. So that is kind of how those are developed, how they're brought, and then they're extracted using very sophisticated processes, so though there's no contaminant residues. Then there is a third-party testing that looks for metals and looks for fungal components and looks at all these things so that you have a purified, rarefied enzyme that can be able to be activated and utilized inside the body.
So, okay, cool. So these are, I think from mass science particularly, are plant-based. I think from
yes.
memory. Yeah, so you mentioned obviously the pork side of things, but just for, again, for the listener, just to know that they're plant-based. I think that's one of the things that I really like about them. I'm 85% plant-based. Just that's basically where I fit, with 40% protein, 30% carb, 30% fat diet. So they fit really well with me personally. Again, that's another reason why I love them over a lot of the other brands. And it's really interesting because you mentioned about obviously the sources of them. One of the questions that came in when we shared this on our Instagram, saying the best question wins biooptimizers prize worth £220, something like that. They said, I love mass enzymes, but I know a lot of the enzymes come from Aspergillus. And on her organic acids test, it shows that she has high mold. Are these suitable for me to take? Which I think is a very good question.
It is a question. It's a common question. And we've had that question thousands of times and have yet to have a single complaint of where it actually compromised or exacerbated that person's condition. One of the things that we do provide as a company is we have a first bottle 365-day guarantee. And what that means is if someone purchased our product in one of those situations and had concerns about it or potential indication to either a condition or some other medication or something else they were doing, that if it doesn't work for them, that's no problem. Just give them all their money back for it. By and large, many of the people who are actually suffering from those conditions actually find the inverse. And the inverse being is that they oftentimes produce even better results than those people who are less compromised with their health and vitality. And so great question. And I think there's your fears can be alleviated.
I mean, I agree, because I had that high on my organic acids test as well, and I was completely fine with them. But I guess it's a common concern. If you have that high and then you see that's in it, you're going to freak out. But I was completely fine. So it's a nice question. So it just resonated with me at that moment. Okay, cool. So in terms of fat burning specifically, how do you think it fits in with fat burning?
Great question. Well, one of the things is really important, and I will speak specifically to the Capex product that we developed, which has what we call our LIPA4 enzymatic component. So we came to fame with masszymes because of our triphase protease. We have 3 different types of proteases, which works in the different pHs, and each one of those proteolytic enzymes, when converted into a systemic enzyme, have a variance with the pathways that they'll enhance as a systemic. Well, when you're looking at a lipase product, there is certainly a lot of clinical and anecdotal evidence that if you consume a higher amounts of lipase, your body's ability to metabolize fats improves because of those enzymes are essential to that component. And we always don't want to make claims. However, it only stands to reason that if we see improvements in the recovery of scar tissue and the improvement of cognitive function with neurotransmitter formation with the use of proteolytic enzymes, well, we would see enhancement with skin and fat metabolism inside the body. So I've had many people come to me throughout the years who have a variety of skin conditions. And what I find is that enzymatic pathway for lipase is often compromised, whether that's due to chemicalization, like heavy metals, or some disruptive component of lipase, or a massive consumption historically of trans fatty acids, which have altered the enzymatic capacity of that person, or damaged gallbladder, or these type of things that lead to a variety of skin conditions, right? Psoriasis, eczema, these type of things. And when we start megadosing them with high levels of lipase, all of a sudden their ability to metabolize and utilize fats improves, and their skin starts to improve, and a lot of their symptoms go away. And so that is a clinical experience that we have seen. And so when we developed the Capex product, keep in mind my business partner, Matt, is a ketogenic guy and I'm a plant-based guy. We're at pretty much polar ends of the spectrum. on our dietary choices, because we're dietary agnostic. We understand there's difference in lifestyle, genetics, preference, spirituality, you name it, that people will develop and advocate a diet. And what we feel is that with the right enzymatic components, you can enhance to your genetics and epigenetics what's right for you and what fits for your lifestyle. And the lipase that we added to that product, along with a host of other ingredients to enhance the ketogenic concept, if you will, about how do you get your body to optimize and metabolize fats as a primary energy source, as it being carbohydrate based, which is most of us where we're dominant. The lipase was a big part of that, to make sure, number one, we are metabolizing, and from a digestive standpoint, the fats that you are consuming, and also that those lipase based enzymes could also enhance the varied fat dependent enzymatic processes within the system outside of digestion. And so that's why we cultivate it and develop that product.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, again, you just, when you talk about oxbile and things like that and the different enzymes and how the liver works, it's like actually supporting the liver is amazing. And I once had an analogy that the liver bile is like washing up liquid for your dishes, because, you know, you see how the oil disperses as soon as you put it, like, so if you have a pan, and I know my iron griddle, I put washing up liquid in it, put hot water in it, and then you just see the oil just suddenly disappear. And it's like, well, that's how it breaks it down. And that, like, if you've got your liver functioning properly, it's instead of having lumps of fat going through your digestive system, which then ruins your digestive system, which again is a part of the ketogenic diet that people just don't talk about. It's like, well, it ruins your digestion after a while. Well, why is that? Do you stress your liver?
I think you broke up there for a second. I lost you for a second.
Yeah, just saying that that if you stressed your liver from being on the ketogenic diet for too long, and you're not breaking down the fats as a result, you're just going to have a distressed GI tract. And adding in the right enzymes will support the liver, help you break down those fats, assimilate the fat, have better energy, and then obviously your hormones come back into line, and so many things happen as a result of that. So again, that's how I feel that it fits in. And again, I feel like it's come from a slightly different angle, but it's the very same result. So it's awesome. So so I'm just going to have a look just to see. Right, so I just want to go into a couple of the questions that we've had come in. And obviously, as you know, the best question will win a prize. I've got the first question here is, if you are 60 and due to estrogen positive breast cancer, you cannot supplement with hormone replacement, what is the best way to build lean muscle? I currently take amino acids, collagen peptides, protein powder daily. I use the IMRS PEMF mat every day. I use red light bed every other day. I do ice baths every day. It's a real struggle. And I would love a little testosterone. Any suggestions would be great. I can imagine what you're going to say.
Well, first and foremost, the foundational aspect of building muscle over and above your kind of genetic predisposition is directly related to the type of training that you are developing. So if you haven't spent the time, effort, and energy to get kind of like systematized training for your individual genetic type and are willing to do that work, you're not going to chemically, like, you're not going to be able to add all these components that are going to do. And I think for a lot of people, the training methodology that they're subjecting themselves to is where the first clue would be. The second thing is about being able to provide to your body divided dosages of protein that is digested by your system. So if you look at the research, if you ate, say, quote unquote, let's say 100 grams of protein all in one serving, it would not be as effective as dividing 20 or 25 grams over 4 or 5 different servings throughout the day. And so that's another thing. I think the third thing is, which he kind of illustrated, which is the hormone cascade. So if we look at men, particularly, I'm assuming this is a man, but it may not be. It's also for women, but we're looking at across the board since the 1970s, a decrease in testosterone levels of on average of 30%. Testosterone is an extremely anabolic hormone inside the body. The second thing to that, I would say, is insulin. Insulin is actually more anabolic than testosterone. And it's one of the reasons why bodybuilders in the late 80s and early 90s began to use insulin in conjunction with growth hormone and testosterone. So if you look at the three different hormones that are active in growth, you're looking at insulin, you're looking at testosterone, and you're looking at growth hormone in combination. Growth hormone, particularly in the advance of the healing of tissue and also the recomposition of creating lean body mass. Because most people don't just want muscle, they want lean muscle, because the easiest way to gain as maximum amount of muscle that possible is to overeat. And this is well documented with sumo wrestlers who have incredible levels of muscle mass because of, forced feeding, and was what they also do in animal cultures in combination with their training, but they also have high levels of body fat. So what you want to be able to do is to cycle between what I would call a diet that enhances insulin sensitivity in combination with multiple feedings of utilizable amino acids, and that means that you've converted your protein to it, with periods that enhance your growth and hormone production. So how does a person do that naturally today as a guy without resorting to exogenous hormones? And I do believe that I can speak to that specifically because I'm that guy. I'm the guy that's not using exogenous hormones. I'm the guy that is using enzymes to enhance that. And I'm also a guy that uses fasting to enhance the hormone cascade of my field. So for that person, I would suggest this. First and foremost, get a Dutch test. Number one, get a set of where your hormones are. Number two, make sure that you are following a training program that fits your physiological capabilities and where you want to go, so that you're doing the right kind of training program. Third thing is, I would say controlled feedings in combination with controlled calorie deficits. And there's two main mechanisms to do that. One way is to go through an increased above metabolic requirements of calorie consumption over the periods of 2 weeks, followed by maybe 2 weeks of lower calorie consumption. That way you gain muscle during that 2 weeks, and then you flip over to a catabolic size where you're reducing that and you're stripping away body fat, and you kind of go on these step ladders regulation. The other way to do it, which is what I've been experimenting recently with extraordinary results, as well as my inside group of biohackers. And keep in mind, I'm a guy that's, almost, getting close to the half-century mark. So it certainly works better for people who are older. I don't know if this is as relative for people who are younger. I think they'd probably be more suited on the two-week cycle. But for people who are older, I believe that usually you can anticipate that your hormone levels have diminished from where you were in your 20s. And what you want to do there is, I use a 12-36 fasting window. So I eat from 8 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. I do that on Mondays, on Wednesdays, and on Fridays. On Tuesdays or Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, I'm fasting. So I fast from 8 p.m. on Saturday night. That's when I stop feeding. And I will not eat until 8 a.m. Monday morning. And on Monday, I'll go to that point and I'll do that same 12-hour eating window, and I won't eat until Wednesday morning. I'll fast all day Tuesday, and I'll train on those food days. Now on Fridays and Saturdays, that's when I'm doing my heaviest workout, like legs, for example, which require a lot of calorie consumption. So I'll hit legs on Friday afternoon, and then maybe do, arms on Saturday as a fun exercise. Well, I'm in a massive calorie consumption. And what I'm not doing is I'm not storing those increased calories as body fat. They're going into the muscles and glycogen. They're going into recovering of my body. And then I'm repriming my hormonal environment on those fast days, which my body is forced to increase growth hormone, increase testosterone levels, and increase insulin sensitivity. So literally on my off days, I'm able to take multiple feedings of both carbohydrates and protein to stimulate insulin and amino acid assimilation while resetting my hormone cascade on the fasting days to optimize my hormonal environment. That way I don't have to leverage exogenous chemicals or drugs in order to produce the results I want.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Really, really good answer. That's a really, really good answer. So I'll ask one more question. What are the best bang for your buck supplements to increase muscle protein synthesis?
No question about it. Masszymes. Second on that list, I would say, is hydrochloric acid. And third on that list, I would say, is P3OM, our proteolytic probiotic, which was designed specifically to scoop up undigested proteins inside the body. That combination with multiple feedings of protein in conjunction with a resistance-based training program is the best way to grow muscle, to assimilate the food that you're using, and to enhance your biochemical capacity to both stimulate growth and also to recover from that stimulation. And that's essentially how we started the company. I was a natural bodybuilding champion that had run into problems following the massive protein consumption. And through that process, I went from going to 250 grams of protein a day and destroying my digestive system to 4 years later going to the world championships and winning multiple titles using 85 grams of protein and the combination I've just illustrated with you right now.
Top notch. I mean, it's awesome because leucine is obviously known to increase protein synthesis. But the thing is, supplementing is good if you're not getting enough, but why aren't you getting enough if you're eating well? And it's like, well, that's where the enzymes come in, because that helps you obviously get the leucine, which then obviously helps with protein synthesis. So if you're already taking the enzymes and you're doing it properly and you still want to increase your protein synthesis, obviously leucine will assist that, but getting it from your food with the right enzymes is obviously significantly better. I love that 240 grams. Sorry, go on.
But one thing I would add to that, particularly for plant-based guys and also for non-plant-based guys, is adding, I've just been doing this experiment recently, which I've found phenomenal results, and that is adding 15 tablets of Chlorella before workouts. And the amino acid uptake of that has been extraordinary. If you go back to some of the bigger advocates of the use of amino acids with Dr. D. Pasquale, who was kind of one of the guys on the anabolic diet, which is a form of anabolic diet. He also used various amounts of amino acids, but I think Chlorella is a superior form of absorption. And I didn't use that early in my career, and I wish I had of, because I feel it as a very powerful ergonomic aid when pre-workout. I'll come back to you probably at the time of the summit. You should ask me that question again, because I'm experimenting with multiple feedings of that as well as a potential anabolic agent.
Amazing. Dr. Dominic Nichwitz, who's the biological dentist I mentioned earlier on, he really recommends Chlorella. Obviously for detoxification, for binding, but also for the protein source as well. So I mean, here when I stayed with him in Germany, he'd neck 40 or 50 of the tablets, and obviously take enzymes as well. So it's like he's all about obviously intercellular or internal healing from the inside out as well. You know, he may be a dentist, but obviously he looks at the nutrition side and how to get that into the cells to repair the body, including bone. So it's interesting how you're saying the same, and he said the same 3 weeks to me 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, what's also interesting too, Chlorella contains K2, which is an essential component for breaking down the calcification within muscle tissue, which is one of the areas that you receive this kind of stiffness with the microtraumas that are created in muscle tissue, and oftentimes can lead to stiffness. So I've also noticed an enhanced reduction of calcification from training, my training damage, and I still go into the gym. I'm certainly not at the performance levels I was as a competitive athlete, but we're still we're still doing the full squats with 3 pies and a side, and the deadlifts with 4 pies aside and things like that. So we're still doing okay in there.
Awesome. So, well, so where can people find you, Wade?
Yeah. So the easiest way to find us is, come find us over at biOptimizers. We have the awesome health podcast for our listeners in the UK's, bioptimizers.co.uk or bioptimizers.com. If you're outside of the UK, you can always put in Health Optimisation with an S. 10, Health Optimisation 10, and you'll get a 10% discount on anything. You can also pick up our awesome health course, which we have available through our company. If you go to any one of our websites, you can get at it. It's fantastic. It's basically all the tricks and tips that I learned from all the advocates that I had. It's a free course. It's 12 weeks. It's 5 to 15-minute videos of everything that anybody can do to optimize those 3 aspects: aesthetics, performance, and health inside the system. And we give it away as a thing. It's not about a supplement pitch or anything else. It's about the practices that will allow you to achieve your best at self.
So is that I remember watching some 15-minute videos where you talk about where you have the pyramid and the breakdown of it, and then it talks about the minerals. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. I watched that about it must have been about a year ago, 9 months ago or something. But yeah, so I really recommend that as well. It's really awesome, and it breaks it down into the fundamental building blocks of the body and health. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. So obviously we'll announce the winner for the best question. And I think for me, I really like the hormone one, especially because of the answer that you came up with as well. So I think that ties in really well. So I think the winner of the prize would be, actually it's a lady that was asking about estrogen positive breast cancer and how to optimize her hormones. So we'll be in touch with you very soon. My team.
One caveat I will say for that particular person, that it's a female, is there is some unique components for females in regards to their hormone cycle and how that works. So if she wants to reach out to our company, I'll direct her to our primary research agent, Katrine, who is an expert in that particular cascades that might offer some nuanced insight as opposed to a generalized answer that I gave.
No, that's amazing. That's cool. Thank you, Wade. That's brilliant. So just to confirm, guys, that anyone that wants to check out the biooptimizers products beforehand, the code is Health Optimisation with the number 10. That's optimization with an S because we're British and awkward, as always. And yeah, that would give you 10% off. And yeah, well, thank you very much for your time today, Wade. It's been awesome. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in London in the coming months. And to look for your
fingers crossed that there's not that we get that on. I'm hoping for it.
Yeah, well, the lockdown is coming off pretty quickly now around here, and I think well, let's not get into the politics, but the government are realizing that it's not quite as they originally panicked and the media made us think. So we will see. We do have a contingency in plan if the date does shift. Yes, everything should be fine considering it was 2 months from nothing to peak and then back down again. 2 months, it still gives us like 2 months before the event pretty much. So yeah, so fingers crossed, but we're still building it like absolute crazy. So yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Yeah. I look forward to being there and connecting with you in person, and all the people who are listening. Please come by our booth. Please stop in. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your questions. It helps us develop our products or services and to better serve the community at large.
Definitely. And guys, check out the podcast with Dave Asprey and Wade as well. There's one, and Matt as well was in on that one, I think, from memory.
Yes.
Remember that very well. So it's really worth a listen. So yeah, thanks again, Wade, for your time. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you again soon.